Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. If our presenters are ready, are we good to go? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. Happy Wednesday afternoon. I'm Melissa Jones with the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence. And I did want to take an opportunity to thank you for joining us as guests and also to our special guest presenters today. As a reminder, this session is being recorded and will be available for you on our website. So if you do have any questions about that, let me know. And then in addition to the presentation that's occurring, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if there are any questions or anything that you feel more comfortable putting in the text box, feel free to do so. And with that, I will turn it over to our guest presenters today, and we'll get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for your lunch hour. It's kind of ironic we're going to be talking about self-care and look at you guys, you're in in a training almost. Yes, we elected to be, but during our hour. But we do hope that you guys will be able to walk away with some real concrete strategies to help navigate through digital wellness and fatigue and incorporating some self-care. We will do a quick introduction of who we are, and then we'll get into some of the presentation guidelines. My name is Professor Gersina Kasanov. I am an instructor and the Director of Field Education for the Undergraduate Social Work Program. Dr. Mira.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Shalita Mira, Assistant Professor in Undergraduate Social Work as well, and I am glad to be with you during this lunch hour to talk about self-care.
So we will go over some basic presentation guidelines. As Melissa stated, this is going to be recorded. But we do want to make this interactive as well. So your video is encouraged, but if you are not actively participating, please keep your microphones muted. The chat is available. Please utilize it. There will be times during the presentation where we're going to ask you to utilize it. And that will make sure to end a couple of minutes early if you have any questions or recommendations, suggestions that we can incorporate in the larger discussion. If we can move to the next slide. You know, our main course objectives here is to really have an honest discussion on the impacts of what we've been living through. You know, we have officially went through one full year of the pandemic. We hit that marker just a few weeks ago, and here we are trucking into year 2. I don't think any of us predicted that we would still be here doing this. We also experienced within this last year a lot of political unrest, and unfortunately experienced that at the beginning of this year with the insurrection. We've also had to experience some personal things through the impacts of this last year that may have impacted us through employment, health scares, childcare, online education, not just for our students that we're working with, but if you have young ones at home, trying to figure that out as well. And then on top of that, other concerns. So our job today, and what we hope to be able to provide you, it's just really looking at why you may be feeling the way that you're feeling, why you may be feeling overwhelmed, stretched too thin, somewhat burnt out, and really talking about normalizing those feelings. Looking at how we can develop some self-care strategies and how we hopefully can maintain some real mental wellness as we move forward. So I'm going to start out the presentation really kind of bringing us to the perspective of where have we been and where are we going? And, you know, a lot of us for a long time had hoped that we would get back to normal rather quickly. And now we're saying, will we ever get to that? What will it look like? And particularly with the change in administration and the new changes on what how the handling of the pandemic, there's a lot of questions of what is going to be our new norm. The effects of COVID-19 has caused a massive change to our daily lives, change that have often happened rapidly and abruptly. Life adjustments often come with a wide range of experiences and emotions, and sometimes that transition can feel smooth, and other times that journey to our new normal can be very choppy and, let's be honest, downright bumpy. So we really want to take a second to think back. What was normal before March of 2020? What did it feel like? What was part of your pre-pandemic, or what I like to call pre-chaos routine? So for example, for me, I found a happy balance between technology and real life. I was able to include more self-care than before, and I felt like I had a stronger boundary between separating work life and home life prior to pandemic. And now I'm struggling. Now I'm really struggling and keeping those two hats on. So, utilizing the chat or unmuting yourself, what kind of was your what did you feel like was your kind of routine prior to COVID? What did you feel like you had really gotten done really well and was maintaining really well?
This is Shirley Gilbert. I like face-to-face teaching. I think it is very exciting for me because you never know what the kids are going to say, which is great. And I was spending my lunch hour with students, and I like doing that. And then scheduling face-to-face conferences. That's all changed.
Yeah.
I find that I think I'm spending an awful lot of my own home time doing conferencing, Zoom conferencing, or being available to do Zoom conferencing. And there seems to be a loss for me, a loss of, I use the word intimacy with face-to-face with kids, but it's now a loss of personal time here at home because I'm waiting for the kids to come into conferences, or I've got conferences, on screen, and I'm spending more time on the computer than I ever thought I would.
Yeah.
And that's, go ahead.
Shirley, I feel you 100%. I feel a loss working with my students now. The connections that I had with them in the classroom it's much more challenging. It absolutely can happen on an online environment, but if you're so used to that classroom, like it sounds like you were and I am, it was a radical shift. And
yes,
I feel like I'm on Zoom more than I'm talking to people live in my house, right?
yes.
I feel like sometimes I have days from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. It's just Zoom, 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 Zoom. And then how does that, when I think about it, the effects it has on my physical health, because I'm sitting all the time, my eyes are tired, they're hurting. And I'm just exhausted by it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that your eyes hurt.
Yes.
Because mine do too. I can only read so much, and I've just got to get up and go someplace, just walk around, do something else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shirley, appreciate you sharing. Dr. Mira said that she loved shopping. Now it's just exhausting to have to be out for long periods of time in the mask. Absolutely, especially during those summer months down here in Florida when it's already so humid out, and now you're just like breathing in your own hot breath. I'm like, oh my God, I just need cooler air, I'm in and out, let's go. Dr. Dedez said combined with COVID-19, his wife went through her second back surgery in early April. My goodness, I was only able to see her once over the 35 days because of COVID restrictions. That had to be so challenging on an emotional level, on a psychological level, because that's your partner. That's who you guys support each other all the time, and not being able to see them. Dr. Dedez, I can't even imagine. That must have been so challenging. did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, it was extremely tough. She had her first surgery in January of 2020. Then her second one in March, and I guess it was late March and all of April. She was in the hospital, and I couldn't go in to see her. And then a third back surgery in November. So 2020 for us sucked in more reasons than just COVID.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point, and we're going to move forward due to time, but it's a good transition point that if we can move forward with the slide, that, you know, if we were all impacted by COVID. We all were sent home, all had to work online, but a lot of us experienced tons of other health crises, financial crises, changes in our routine that would have happened no matter what, if COVID was in existence or not. But because of COVID, it made them extremely more challenging. So that impacted our norm, what we were able to used to do, lean on, cope with. Those strategies were much more difficult. You know, some people may find themselves in survival mode during this time and still feel like they're in survival mode, gathering information and resources necessary to function at school, at work, just being a human being in relationship with others. Others may be attempting to settle into their new routines. It's been a while, so you may feel like, okay, this is just what it is. And for some, this may mean trying to combat still social isolation. You know, I share an office with one other person, and I haven't seen her since March of 2020. Dr. Mira and I see each other on Zoom all the time, but I don't think I've seen her since March of 2020. So a lot of us are still very much struggling with that isolation. It means learning how to live or even relive with friends, family members, partners, roommates, which is not always easy. You know, I hear a lot of people struggling to find distraction-free spaces at home that is conducive to productivity and effective work. For myself, I feel like it takes me twice as much time and effort and energy even to do simple tasks, which can be quite draining. I've really had to be very compassionate and patient with myself, and others may be struggling with that because of fatigue and frustration and sadness and anger and grief amongst all the other emotions because of this drastic adjustment. Some people have gone through adjustment processes and finding comfort in their new norms. But for others, it may still seem difficult to adjust to that new norm. Slide, please. And the reason why it may feel so difficult to adjust is because no one was immune to these effects. If you really think about it, in the last 12 months, our world has been turned upside down. We've spent the first few months in social isolation, away from colleagues, away from our normal routines. Many of us felt immediate loss from our workloads and personal businesses. Our families were impacted. We were navigating, teaching our young children mathematics that, to be honest, some of us probably haven't even looked at in decades, and probably still don't really know how to do it. We had to learn new technology. We had to adjust our years of teaching practices, like Shirley stated. We had to be more than just faculty members to our students. Without knowing it, we took on their emotions, their frustrations, and struggles to adjust, particularly our international students who have, for some, have yet to go home. Without knowing it, we were giving them a glimmer of hope that things would improve, but still having to deal with the constant changes through the civil unrest and our fight for social justice. And then came fall, and we all made additional sacrifices. Some of us really trying to keep the normalcy and the integrity of the classroom while our students still continued to struggle. And yet, we even struggled to give ourselves grace. For my colleagues, that restraint of not being able to travel, and the relationships felt like we were locked in a box. And for some of us, we still feel like we're in that box. And particularly for my fellow introverts like myself, we're getting tired of it too. Some of us may have liked it in the beginning, but now we equally are tired and are dealing with the loss of relationships. So when you really think about the multiple impacts it has hit our family, our education, our employment, our health, and our community relationships, it's been a lot. And that is why you feel the way that you do. Next slide, please. If we look at it from a very larger perspective, the effects of COVID-19, fatigue, digital fatigue, it has had a major effect on our mental health and the mental health around globally. Lisa Carson, she was the past president of the American Public Health Association. She's also an executive, excuse me, an executive administrator of Emory University School. She said that the physical aspects of the pandemic are really visible, but we don't have a vaccine for our mental health like we do for our physical health. So it still takes a lot longer to come out of those challenges. And that's why a lot of us are still struggling with the mental health and self-care component. Next slide, please. Some current data and some current trends when we look at mental health and the impacts of COVID-19 shows that screenings for anxiety and depression has risen. Isolation has increased in vulnerable populations. As I mentioned, our international students. And these effects can last for months. But let's be honest, there is some silver lining to all of this. The mental burden of the pandemic has facilitated more honest conversations, more empathetic conversations about mental health, which is key to really dismantling the stigma that deters a lot of people from seeking help. Think about it. How often did we have these types of trainings prior to the pandemic? And yet here we are today, really discussing and talking about it, where you guys are saying, honestly, I need some help, which is, again, a wonderful silver lining from the burdens of the pandemic. Another positive is that more people have been either reaching out for help or serving others, whether it's donating to important causes, grocery shopping for neighbors, cheering on those who serve as essential workers, and not only just being kind and reminding each other that it's okay to feel the way that you do and have a little grace for yourself. And then collectively here at the university, we have shared the counseling number more. We are showing each other grace, and we are really working together to protect our pride, not just physically health-wise, but now moving in the direction for mental health-wise. So we have experienced, and we are still experiencing, a lot. So we want to take a moment to include you more into this conversation. Using the chat, what do you feel has impacted you the most with all this change? And my follow-up to that is, what are 2 things you want to try to incorporate to help you with that impact? So the first question is, what do you feel has impacted you the most? And what are 2 things that you want to restore in your life to help you with that impact? And if it's easier for you to just unmute yourself, please go ahead.
I think, Christina, for me, would be the change in how we worship. So, being a pastor, we have not held in-person services since last March. And that has been a huge gap for me. It's been a huge gap for my congregants, and being able to meet their needs spiritually and physically. So for me, I'm really looking forward to that restoration of that in-person Sunday worship where we can socialize, we can worship together, spread the love, and just feel the community. I think it feels like a loss of community. As much as we try to hold it together using all of the virtual means and as much one-to-one as we can, it just still doesn't seem or feel the same.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. A lot of us are missing those things that we took for granted, going to church every Sunday and having that social piece of it as well. For me, I'll share mine. I have a 2-year-old, so we've had 1 full year of the pandemic with him. And there's so much fun and exciting things to do when you have a 1 and 2-year-old, because they're just learning and growing, and they're experiencing new things. And there's a lot of things that we had to restrict. And now that he's 2 and he's supposed to wear a mask, which I don't know about all of you, if you have those 2-year-olds in your life or have grandchildren or nieces and nephews, good luck having them wear a mask for more than 30 seconds. So that restriction, now that he's 2, has actually kept us more isolated, because we can't go places now where there are masks required, because he will not do it. And he's 2. You can't tell him why. He's like, no, I want to wear it. So, what we're trying to do is incorporate more things where we can still be outside, where he can still explore, where he can still be a child without those restrictions to be involved. So, we're talking a lot about the bad parts, the hard parts, the things that we're like, why are you reminding us? We live it every day. But we partly, or why I'm partly really talking about it, is to really remind us that it is how you're feeling, what you're going through is what we've all are going through still. A lot of people think it's been a year, you're adjusted, you should be okay. But most of us are still not fully adjusted. Dr. Dedez wrote, right, your wife's medical condition, your wife's medical condition, and your younger son and his family moving in. Oh my goodness. Dr. Dedez, you've had a lot of life changes over this year. This added 3 people, with one of them being a 1-year-old, and that you and your wife had been empty nesters for 15 years. That is a radical change. Absolutely. Yeah, going from that free time, being introverts, and now Legos all around, active 2-year-old. Yes, what a radical change.
The Legos aren't all around. I'm scared to open them because if he was to break one I was working on, I'd have to kill him.
Yeah. I hear you on that one. Yeah, I get that too.
Piled up that I need to put together, but I just won't do it.
Yeah, so Dr. Dedez, you bring up a good point, right? So that's your self-care routine. And that was something that, you could drift your mind away while you're doing it. It was a fun hobby, something you really enjoyed. And now look at you, you're unable to do it because of the addition of having a 2-year-old. And I totally understand that. Maybe through this whole thing, Dr. Dedez, your 2-year-old and my 2-year-old can meet and they can just go crazy. But yeah, that talk about those impacts. And I think we've all felt that. So we really want to, and thank you everyone for sharing. I think what we really want to move forward now with our presentation is, so what can we do? These are the impacts, these are our feelings, so how can we move forward? And I'm going to hand this off to my colleague, Dr. Mira, who's going to bring us on that part of the journey.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Kazanov. So we've talked a lot about those systemic things kind of within our own little circle, right? Our own little network. But before we start looking at some coping strategies, I do want to bring our awareness to some other impacts that are not so evident. So when we think about vicarious trauma, right? When we turn on the television and we're watching the news, or our children are watching the news, or they're wondering why they can't have their birthday party. My daughter's birthday is today, my 11-year-old, and this would have been the second birthday party that she would have missed, except we were able to book the skating rink for a private party. And I was so thankful for that, because last year she was forgiving. But this year was like, Mommy, I'm missing my birthday party. So when we think about how all of this has impacted us, it really has had some systemic effects with regards to not only our family, but normalcy of life. But when we turn on the television, I mean, just in the past couple of days, we have experienced via television 2 mass shootings, right? So that now is becoming a part of what we are talking about with our families, things that we're thinking about as we're starting to navigate back into, say, grocery stores, right? These are becoming fears, simply because of what we're exposed to when we call vicarious or secondary trauma. So we may not necessarily be the actual victim of the trauma, but our experience to witnessing or hearing about does have an emotional or psychological effect on us. And it does impact how we see the world, how we experience the world, how we navigate in the world, and our comfort. Some other terms to think about is compassion fatigue. With everything that has changed, the reality of it is we do feel irritable sometimes, right? Our compassion, it's seeming to have a limit. Dr. Dedesh, for example, you shared your experience with your wife, and my grandfather had a mild heart attack a couple of days ago. And he was in the hospital, and I found it extremely frustrating that we could not get to him. My grandmother was the only person, they would only allow one person back. I'm the one that normally and typically calms him. He did not understand where he was because they had to do some emergency procedures. It was horrid, and I felt helpless, right? And I was about at my wit's end with showing compassion to the healthcare workers. I had to step back and understand that this is their job and this is the protocol to ensure everyone's safety. And so it took a moment to really step back and say, no one comes in between me and my grandpa. But then to have to think that, they're here working and they're giving me their best. And so, but compassion fatigue is real. When we think about burnout as well, the multifaceted sources of stress, right? So feeling like everything is piling on us, we're feeling extremely overwhelmed, can lead to burnout. And it leads to a real soul weariness. If we're not introspecting, if we're not taking the moment or those times to check in with ourselves and really examine how we're really feeling in the moment, if we're not taking the time to be authentic about our own soul weariness, right? It can really lead to this generalized hopelessness. And so Dr. Stamm wrote this quote, and I love it because it says there's a soul weariness that comes with caring, from daily doing business with the handiwork of fear. And that seems to be kind of the flow that we're in now with regards to the pandemic and how it's changed our lives. And we hear about the vaccine, but then we're still hearing we have to wear masks. Even with the vaccine and new strands, right? We have this hopefulness. And then because of what we're hearing, it kind of re-triggers a little bit of hopelessness. But she says here, sometimes it lives at the edge of one's life, brushing against hope and barely making its presence known. At other times, it comes crashing in, overtaking one with its vivid images of another's terror, with its profound demands for attention, nightmares, strange fears, and hopelessness. So what Dr. Stamm is really saying is we have to be so very careful with making sure we are checking in with ourselves, checking in with our family members and our loved ones around us, checking in with our students, because it does seem to creep in unawares. And before we know it, we are feeling significantly overwhelmed, significantly overloaded, and we may not quite understand why unless we are doing those check-ins. And so when we think about vicarious trauma holistically, we realize that if we're not careful, trauma, vicarious exposure, chaos can really slowly and subtly change our worldview, how we see things. And so when we think about our worldview, it's our perception, it's how we see the world, it's how our responses are driven, right? And so our spectrum of responses are either going to be negative, they're going to be neutral, or they're going to be positive. The goal of this workshop really is to, in the beginning, bring awareness to the fact that, yes, these things exist. We want to honor your authenticity. We want to give you the space to expose, to talk about, and to purge from them. But the ultimate goal is really to spark some what we call vicarious resilience. We want you to continue to experience that vicarious transformation, right? That compassion and that satisfaction. Even though the world may be changing, there's still so much beauty within it. And when we're going through and we're experiencing all of that chaos, we have to take the time to see the beauty. And so when we talk about vicarious resilience, it really is being authentically aware of our presence in that moment, how it is impacting us emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, physiologically, biologically. But then being intentional about identifying self-care strategies, and then also being intentional about making sure that we employ those strategies. So I want you to take a moment and kind of look at the two graphics on the screen. One, they both talk about self-care, and they both have some different terms that we can attach to our own self-care. So if you take a moment for me and maybe look at these two graphics and choose two words that you feel like you can, beginning today, moving forward, two words that you can integrate into your life, into your behavioral practice. Maybe it's with your family, friends, students, self. What two words can kind of define this present moment and moving forward that you can use? And I know my two words are awareness, and the other word for me is energy. So I see Professor Kazanov has healthy limits and balance. You are more than welcome to come off of mute and share what your two words are, but I want you to be intentional about choosing two words from this graphic. And we're doing this now because we don't often find those spaces in the normal ebb and flow of our day to have this kind of awareness. Go ahead, Ms. Shirley.
I pick up the word relaxation because I don't know how to do that. Workaholic is pretty much a good name for me. If I sit down and read, or I binge watch, or I attempt to binge watch something that I've got on Netflix or whatever, I feel guilty. I didn't get this done. I didn't get that done. I should have been doing that. So that bothers me. And that's been a problem for ever since I started working. And I need to focus on the process of keeping healthy. I think that's very important.
Good.
But that relaxation, I don't know if I'll ever acquire that skill. And that truly does. Go ahead, please.
I'm really hoping that you do, Miss Shirley. I'm really hoping that the awareness of the need for that now really does spark some transformation moving forward with regards to relaxation.
I need to figure out what it is besides sitting and reading a book or binge watching old shows that I haven't seen forever. But yeah, and that makes it for a broader backside. And that has to go to, that's something else to think about. But I got to work on that relaxation because I don't do that enough.
Yes, ma'am. And we're going to talk about some specific strategies here in just a moment that may give you some starting places with regards to relaxation.
Well,
Dr. Dedez put presence. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Dedez put presence and healthy fitness, right? That's awesome. Anyone else want to share? 2 words. What about you, Miss Carrie? What 2 words did you pull?
I think patience. That's something that I often lack. And probably healthy coping as well.
Okay, awesome. What about you, Daniel? You got 2 words for me?
Yeah, I've got a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old, excuse me. And we were all sick last week. So all 4 people in my house were sick last week. So definitely patience and wellness would be the 2 that I would pick.
All right. I'm glad you and your family are feeling better. Yes. What about you, Miss Candace? 2 words.
Well, I have about 6 of them that I can't decide between, but I think healthy limits is one, which really goes hand in hand with balance for me. And an example of it is my daughter came by last night and I was laying on the sofa. I had a headache and I was just spent. And I laid down on the sofa and she came in and she said, "Whoa, you're not on your computer." I'm like, well, that's a really lousy example for my daughter, that's where she would expect me to be when she comes by in the evening. So that's a good, I mean, that's a hit you in the face, you're out of balance lesson. And then the other is fitness. I was, before the pandemic, I was going to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, and it really helped me stay in shape. Obviously, it has huge health benefits, and you sleep better, you have more energy, blah, blah, blah. I gained 10 pounds over the pandemic, and I'm not self-disciplined enough to work out at home. So the gym I went to, you had to schedule your class. So if you missed, you paid for it. So that was a great incentive, The gym I'd gone to before, you'd be on the road driving and it was like, okay, I've got my gym bag in the back. I can turn right and go to the gym, or I can turn left and go home. And I turned left more often than right. But with the gym that I was going to, it was just a really great way to be self-disciplined because you were kind of being disciplined by other external forces. I want to be Greg because Greg will take 30 minutes in the middle of his workday and go to his treadmill and work out, and he'll get exercise in, and then he'll go back to work. I can't do that because I'd be a mess. But anyway, you didn't need to know that. But he's very self-disciplined, and of course he teaches a wellness course, so he lives it, and I really respect that. But I really appreciate the self-discipline, and I really need to work on that.
All right. Thank you, Miss Candace. Greg, so I'm interested to see what your 2 words are.
I think I was like Candace, I do have several different ones that kind of came to mind, but energy is one. I feel like even though I don't know, I got 3 kids and we're always going in different directions all the time. And by the time I get to bed, I feel completely exhausted, And I was, even though I do sometimes when I'm at home, I'll do the treadmill for a break. Not as disciplined as I was before as far as working out, so not quite having as much energy. But and then I think for me, balance is one too. And prioritizing the amount of things that I have between my work and my family, and your own personal things that you want to do and your own growth, and just being able to balance all of it. Getting to the end of the day and going, wow, what happened? Like I didn't balance everything that I needed to get done during that day or during that week. So.
All right. Thank you, Greg. And Georgina. I know she was transitioning, so she may not be able to come off the mute. So, yeah, I want you to take these 2 words, or the 3 or the 4 or the 5 that you selected, and write those on a sticky note. Make them a part of your vicarious resilience. Make them a part of your transformation and your wellness. Because if not, what happens is this whole disruption in how we tend to operate. And so I listed some here, just some comparisons between what's vicariously resilient and what's vicariously traumatic, and how it impacts us. And so we start to see subtle things like sleep disruption and nightmares, fearfulness, that irritability and fatigue, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, right? Ruminating, not being able to turn our minds off. It's like we go. And even if we're physically still, our mind is still running. There's like a whole marathon going on in our mind. But then on the opposite side of that is that disassociation, that lack of feeling like our normal selves, right? Hyperarousal. And then there can be some numbing that can happen that can impact our relationships. And so as we're kind of finding the calm in our chaos, there's some things that we really want to do and some things we want to be careful of before we kind of jump into kind of defining some personalized coping strategies. But we want to make sure that we do think positively, that we do have regular exercise. Several of you have identified that we do have a balanced diet, that we are relaxing, that we have some normalcy in a daily routine, that we have some socialization, even if it's online, right? Some fun socialization. It doesn't always have to be serious meetings. Taking a break from the monotonous routine of our work, and then trying to find other healthy life strategies. Some things that we don't want to do is have too much wine after a long day, right? The 1 glass turns to 2, turns to 5, and then we're on the Zoom meeting, right, Professor Kazanov, with our cups. And instead of coffee, we have something else. So we want to make sure that we're monitoring our libation intake.
Dr. Mira, don't out me for my practices.
We want to make sure that we're not eating too much fast food, right? Because we're in meetings longer, we don't feel like cooking. So McDonald's and Burger King and Zaxby's becomes the replacement for a nice home cooked meal. Binge watching can be good, Miss Shirley, but we want to be careful that we don't do too much of it, especially when it comes to the news. Make sure we're not doing too much partying, being careful about making sure that we're safe in our travel, and just monitoring what we consider to be authentic and real news versus the fake news that might be out there. Okay, so this is a little tree here, and I'm going to make sure that it's sent to you all, but on this tree are some different practices. And I chose this tree, and I love this tree because we know that all of the nourishment for our branches come from our roots. It's the roots that really sustain us. So at the root of the tree are 3 words: communion, communication, and awareness. Communion and communication are on one side of the trunk leading to the root of the tree, and awareness is on the other side, because they are both wholly important but separate. There has to be some individual, self-focused, isolated, what I call contemplative time, where we are alone, self-reflecting, but there also needs to be an equal amount of time in that communion and connection, connecting with people. So at the branches beginning to bud are all of these different practices that you could use. So there are some stillness practices such as silence, centering prayers, insight meditations, sitting meditations. There's some movement practices such as martial arts. Georgina loves Zumba, right? We're thinking about Tai Chi, labyrinth walking. There are some others such as ritual or cyclical practices. So we think about having a Shabbat or a Sabbath. We think about certain ceremonies that we may have. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Lectio Divina. It is a strong Catholic practice, but it's also used in many other faiths where you may read a passage, but you read that passage multiple times with different rhythm, because the goal is not simply just to read it, but to understand it and to digest it and to make it a part of who you are. I love the word digest because we think about digesting food, right? That food, once it goes into our digestive tract, it is broken down, and it is all of it, the nutrition is sent to where it is needed or required in our body. And so the same thing happens when we prioritize self-care. So use this tree. Find some different strategies from this tree that you've never used before, and then digest them. Make them a part of your practice, whether it's an activist or centering or relational. I have this particular tree in my office because when I come in here, I typically try to find something from the tree, from the branches, right, to help nourish and even preserve the root, the foundation of who I am. So for the last few minutes, we're going to really kind of delve into some different self-care strategies. So what we'll do is Professor Kazanov and I will kind of alternate slides. I'll start here with exercise. And these are just some examples. I want you to flood the chat as well when we talk about these different areas. If you have any that are not listed here or some examples you want to share, please put them in the chat so that the others in here, you may have something that you want to, that you use that works well, that you want to share. So the first one is exercise. Gyms are closed, but there are a lot of online classes that are out there, right? So Georgina, I think, hosts a online Zumba. I'm not sure if she still does or not, or does online Zumba, but there's an example. There are also some others. I have a Peloton, right? I have the Peloton bike and the Peloton treadmill. But even beyond that, there are a bunch of different workouts on there that I can jump in my garage, which is my gym, and I can get in there and I can dance, I can do weights. What are some other exercise regimens that you all are using in the pandemic that you could share if one cannot get to their physical gym? And you can type them in the chat, or you can unmute and share if you want. What are some apps that you're using? So I'll type in Peloton. I know there are a bunch of them out there.
This one really,
All
I
right,
mean, it sort of has to
ahead.
do with exercise. The Rally app, which is through iCuba. So if you're part of that, to me, that's a great app. Actually, I have a notification on my phone every day that says check your Rally app, and actually go through, and you can schedule all these activities. One of which is the step count, you know, because I have it directly connected to my phone or to my watch. So it gives it my step count, and they actually have challenges that you can do, and you get earn points for it, that sort of thing. But it also goes to even some of these other activities, like, you know, did you go to bed on time? Did you exercise today or get your step count? Did you meditate? You know, there's different ones that you can actually plug in there, and you can say, I did it or I didn't do it. So, you know, but it's tied to our iCuba account. So, and the great part about it too is you can earn rewards, which you can earn money and gift certificates through it. So that makes it a little bit more incentive for me anyway.
Yeah,
Oh,
Greg,
yeah.
I was just going to say, I use that because of the incentive piece of it. Dr. Mira knows me very well. If there's nothing in it for me, forget it. And I have to feel like I'm not exercising to participate in exercising. So I do things that, you know, sound really silly, but I can incorporate it in my daily routine, and I don't really realize doing it. And one of those things is because I had a lot of time in the beginning of the pandemic because I was home, I started cleaning out some of the clutter that was in my house. And my husband, he's a gamer. He had an old Wii system, and he hooked it up, and we started playing those old Wii games, like the boxing one, things like that, where it was a video game, but you were actually working out. It was mostly to help young kids get back involved in exercise, but it helped me a lot. So, you know, for me, it was really looking at ways to exercise, but really not feel like I was exercising. And the other thing is having that accountability partner. So another colleague of ours, Dr. Perez, I have my iWatch step counter linked so she can see it, and she will remind me. She will text me throughout the day and say, hey, I saw you haven't moved lately. You're still at like 58%. You need to get up and start walking. Having that accountability person has helped a lot, because sometimes I'm so busy that I don't like, oh yeah, I haven't walked in 3 hours. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. So getting up and getting that to move around.
So there are some other great suggestions in the chat. So definitely write any of those down for those of you who wanted to incorporate more healthy fitness. There are a lot of great apps that you can use. The next one is meditation. So I know many of you talked about relaxation and meditation. So the same is true with regards to a lot of resources out there. So when it comes to relaxation and meditation, you really have to find what works for you and understand that meditation is I call it an art, because when you originally start relaxation, it is going to feel very foreign, and you're going to feel the need to do. I want to remind you that we are human beings and not human doing, which means we have to learn how to just be at times, okay? And so there are some apps out there with regards to helping you with different types of breathing, like box breathing. There's body scanning. So if you want to flood the chat with apps that you use, the Calm app is great. If you like more of a spiritual app, you may want to use something like Abide, right? Many of the other ones like Peloton, they also have built-in meditation apps as well. So you can check those. And then finding other activities that you love. And so some of those may be having a glass of wine, watching a movie, taking a bath, indulging in activities that you like. And then I'll just go ahead, since I know we only have a couple minutes, I'll go ahead and finish up, Professor Kavanaugh. We have gardening, right? For many of you, it's springtime. Gardening it breaks away the monotony. You get to dig in the dirt. You can watch things grow. You can cook, right? Cooking is another one that you can create healthy meals. So if you have any cooking apps or websites that you use, pop those in the chat, because we talk about healthy cooking, healthy eating. The best way to do that is to prepare your own meals. What better way than to grow your own meals, right? And to grow your own fruit and vegetables, and then to harvest them, and then to actually eat those as well. The cooking channel, I love Ree Drummond, the Pioneer Woman. And so I record her episodes on the TV, and then I'll go back and watch them on Saturday morning. And so Professor Kavanaugh put Spark Recipe. The Food Network also has an app. Crafting is another. So go to YouTube, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, all of those classes that they used to offer when you could go into the store and attend, they're doing them online for free. So you can learn how to do a lot of the crafting online by just going to their YouTube page or to Facebook. Do it with your kids. They're doing Lego workshops, different types of workshops on how you can use, it's not Play-Doh, but it's a model magic, how you can create things. So yeah, Pinterest is awesome. It's awesome. And then use this time to foster relationships. So maybe there's an old friend, right? Or someone you haven't spoken to in a very long time that you can Zoom. For I'm an Alpha Kappa Alpha. And so what we do is we have paint parties, virtual paint parties. So we're at home, we have our easel with our pictures that we're painting, and we're on Zoom and we have a blast. Make it fun. I know we're on Zoom all day long, but maybe you can meet out at the park and do something outdoor where you can have safe distance, but also have fun. And get creative with your loved ones, okay? This is impacting everyone. So I think the more we can make things fun in our homes, you can take the smallest little chore and turn it into a game with kids. My daughter loves basketball, so we make throwing things in the trash a basketball game. We'll ball up paper and throw it in there. And so, Professor Kavanaugh, I'm gonna let you jump back in the last minute or so and share some of yours, and you can continue to flood the chat, and then you can close us out.
Sure. So just 3 quick pointers. I put the one in the chat for being creative with your loved ones. You know, a lot of us are still trying to social distance, but we also want to have a life, right? We want to reconnect, have some time. So my husband and I actually ordered, it's called the Adventurous Date Night, and it's a book, and it comes with Polaroid camera too. So there's money up front, but not money at the end of it. And what it is when you can have a date night, you kind of scratch off this little hidden piece of it, and then it tells you what to do for your date night. And one of the examples for our date night that we actually just did was to find a parking lot, put on your high beams, so an empty parking lot, put on your high beams, blast your music, and just have a dance party. And as silly as that sounds, you know, and I was like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. Why are we doing this, right? Because my husband's much more adventurous than I am. It was just so much fun. Like, I didn't realize how much I just needed to dance, like just get it out of me. And, you know, we had like a crazy like rock out moment song. And then we just had a really nice, soft, like slow dance song, because, you know, we haven't had that, you know, and that created that intimacy. Another one was to go out into a supermarket, and we were we would go up and down the aisle with our finger, and then the other person would say stop, and whatever your finger landed on, that's what you were having for date night. So we did that for like our dinner, our dessert, and you come home and you cook it together, and it was just so much fun. So finding those kind of creative ways to reconnect. The other thing that I'll quickly say as we wrap up is we have to be intentional about this. So I think of Shirley, because Shirley, you are so much like me. I have a hard time disconnecting. I feel guilty of the things that I'm not doing. So I have had to incorporate self-care even in my work. So when I'm in the classroom, I spend the first 5 minutes asking my students, how are you doing? When they enter into my virtual classroom, I have music playing. So now I can incorporate some dance moves in there with them, and we can just relax, and it sets the tone. We do breathing exercises, and we do the Calm app in the classroom, because sometimes that's the only time that I get to do it as well. So I'm using it as a moment to teach them about self-care, but what it actually is, it's my moment of self-care. So we need to be very intentional as we move forward to incorporate this into our daily lives and find that self-care practice that will speak to these three things: your mind, your body, and your spirit. And if that is something different from each of us, so be it. But finding that moment that we can incorporate that into our lives. We appreciate you guys spending your lunch hour with us. Again, hopefully you will spend your lunch hours the rest of the week taking your lunch. But we really appreciate this time to share some of this information with you.
Thank you both so much, Dr. Mira, Professor Kasnoff. Thank you. I have seen an iteration of this presentation before and knew it was something that we would all need to revisit. So my sincerest thanks for your willingness to do this. And I hope everyone who joined us today is able to take away some ideas and a moment of refreshment as well. And we always appreciate any sort of feedback that you have or suggestions for our future program that we could offer. So in the chat, I have included a link to just a very short quiz survey, not a quiz. And if you would leave us a little bit of feedback, that's always appreciated. I'm going to stop the recording now, but feel free to stay in the room for any sort of candid conversations or questions that you would like to ask.